afternoon. I'm Rupert Guttridge. I'm from Guestline, and I'm the moderator today to talk about how to price in a world of disruption. And luckily, I've got two experts with me on the panel today, so who will know an awful lot more about this subject than I will.
Hi, so I'm Paul van Meernonk. I'm Global Director Advisory Services for Ideas. I work on change management, people process side of revenue management equation and distribution, sales and marketing. And we're pretty much global, so I work on projects here in the UK and then independent hotels and some of the more regional chains, and also globally with larger chains and in different countries. So hopefully can add a bit of perspective from the global side as well.
And we have David Gregg as well. So from
Yeah, my name is David Gregg. I work for a collection of lifestyle hotels in Dublin city centre. We have 3 hotels that I look after in various different submarkets within Dublin city. In my time looking after revenue management in that market, I've kind of done it in a constant backdrop of disruption. From initially joining a market that had increased its capacity by 50% right into when demand contracted by about the same in the last recession. And then basically where we are now, where that has all picked back up again. And our supply has stayed absolutely constant with where it was 5 or 6 years ago. A little bit different, our market is obviously driven by UK and US business, so the majority of things that impact on our demand and on our market are absolutely outside of most hotels' control.
Great, so I think we've got quite a good panel here. So from the hotel perspective, obviously David brings the hotelier's view on the world. Paul brings from the systems and the technology perspective, his view on the world. As I say, I've got a bunch of questions here covering a very wide range of topics. We're going to go through those. The one that really interests me the most, though, is the one about segmentation, whether we should be doing segmentation, how we price with segmentation. You know, the Joe Bloggs of this world turn up to a hotel Monday to Friday wearing a suit, booking his IBM rate or whatever, and then he comes in on a Thursday wearing a pair of jeans and he's booked through booking.com, but he's there for the same reason on all 4 or 5 nights. So how do we manage all of that and price for all that? For me personally, that's a fairly hot topic. It's one that comes up as far as I'm concerned when I meet hoteliers on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, I'm only looking at the PMS side of things, so I say pricing is over to you, hoteliers. It's up to me just to store the price and the profile and everything else. But obviously, these guys have some real experience of that as well. But we've got some fun ones just to warm up with. So the first question we're going to talk about is Brexit, really, and whether Brexit has caused any or whether it can be considered an external factor as far as disruption of pricing and things like that. So I'm going to start with Paul and ask him about whether he considers Brexit to have been anything that we need to worry about as far as pricing is concerned.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, next one. We'll move on to that.
No, I think certainly you have to think about it and you have to be concerned about it. I think one of the things to be careful with is not to make rash decisions and go extremely one way or the other. So if you think back, before the vote came out, there was a lot of questions about, the economy in the UK is going to go down. There's going to be lots of issues after the vote comes out, and that really hasn't happened. So, be careful not to put all your eggs in one basket. And, from a revenue management perspective, just try to keep as balanced an approach to the business as possible. So, of course, you need to have some contracted business and you need to have some groups, etc., and try and balance that out. But try not to have a knee-jerk reaction to go one way or the other without knowing all the facts and really what's happening on the ground. And as things change and evolve and the market changes, you want to be able to have that flexibility to adapt to that situation. So keep a balanced approach in your inventory, but it's definitely going to impact something, but be ready for it and not proactively do things without knowing all the facts.
Okay, and Dave, yourself?
Yeah, I guess we have a very different challenge with Brexit than a lot of people in this room would have. Obviously, a large amount of our business comes from the UK, and we have a very real risk in the decreasing value of sterling, certainly against our other core incoming market, which is the US, where the exact opposite is happening with their buying power. For us, Brexit brought the whole UK business conversation to the table, but we'd already recognised that as of months before Brexit was even something that was a hot topic, we had started to see a competitiveness issue with UK business coming into Ireland. For us, the key challenge that we've had around Brexit is to actually understand where the risk is, more so than the impact. And then once we could identify where the risk was, then we started to look out to see the impact, and then we started to obviously look at how we can minimize the impact from those risks. And very much it's understanding what type of customer that's impacting, where they book, and how you can be tactical in allaying the impact of its diminished currency value and everything else.
So I understand the challenge around currency. I can understand, if the value of various currencies fluctuate, what does that do to your rates within the property, and I can understand how you might change them because of an increase or decrease in a currency fluctuation. So what are you doing? What are you amending your rates in the various segments to meet the change in fluctuation of currency, or are you just taking the hit the upside on the other side of the coin, if you know what I mean?
It's very much one size does not fit all. And
Right.
within the hotels that I look after, there's a very different risk and a very different set of tactics to minimize that risk. If we look at some of the other markets then that are emerging as well, so Dublin runs at pretty much capacity for 6 months of the year. So we're kind of not too concerned about the risk for that period. But when it comes to driving demand and being more competitive in the times of the year when we're not running at capacity, we're just being an awful lot more tactical with what we promote and what channels we use to try and be more competitive to the markets that are impacted by that and the segments.
Any comments from you about how you might change your pricing based on the currency fluctuation?
Well, I think the currency fluctuation is probably going to have the biggest impact on the demand, right? So the demand from a certain market or a certain segment is going to change based on the currency fluctuation. However, it's very difficult to try to preempt that too far in advance because you don't know it could go up or down. And the booking windows for a lot of things are quite short. So I think to the point made earlier, it's really about looking at it as specific as you can. How do you get to know where your business is coming from? What are the segments or people that are booking those different price points, and how are they going to be impacted by that change? And taking a broad brush approach is very dangerous, right? So you have to look at it as detailed as possible. So the more, to help do that, it's really about getting to know your customers, where's that demand coming from, and which segments are going to be impacted. So groups further out, you're going to have to make different decisions than short-term business, and then contracted versus contracted. So those things still apply.
An interesting one was raised there as well. Trump came up, the good old name Trump. It seems like we can never get away from that. So let's just quickly address that. Whether Mr. Trump's inauguration has affected occupancy rates, anything like that. Anyone see? How do we handle that?
We're not seeing any significant change yet in our US
In the US
business yet. We are conscious of there being an element of risk there, but we're not saying anything. We are keeping an eye very closely. It's a key market for our properties. I think, to be honest, there is more of a risk in the uncertainty and in everything else in the lead into it. Now that that's one of the most disruptive things. Now that there's actually a certainty, we're kind of in the space where we may move beyond that.
I would agree. I think I don't think demand has shifted one way or the other in any significant way anywhere yet as a result of Trump. But I think what's happened is the uncertainty has increased dramatically. So if you Google economic uncertainty or uncertainty in travel, you'll see a lot of charts come up that show you that all the surveys that have been done, all the research that's been done shows that companies and travelers don't really know what's going to happen or what to expect. So the uncertainty is very high. They may not have changed their travel plans right now. They're maybe having a bit of a wait and see. And what we've seen previously in the downturns and things like that is that groups tend to be those affected first. So if you're looking at your own business and you want to get a sense of what's happening there, you'll probably start to see something happening on the group side soon where maybe they're holding back a little bit. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to book that trip, or I'm not sure we're going to book that group yet. So the group side will probably be impacted.
So we'll move on to the meaty bit as far as I'm concerned, and that's this segmentation question. I think it covers. I mean, who uses market segments in the hotels? Okay, and you obviously price by segmentation. And how good is your data in regard to who belongs to that segment? I imagine there's profiles that sit in all of the segments, and there's various bits and pieces like this. So the question I'm really sort of talking about is, should we really be using segmentation as well? I think that's a fairly key issue for me. So I just want to put that out there to these guys, and then maybe put that to the floor as well, and see if anyone's got any comment about whether really segmentation is something of the past, or whether it's something that's still relevant today.
I think it's very much still relevant, but I think it's a piece of information that goes together with other pieces of information to give you actionable data. We have to group at some level people that are similar and customers that have similar buying trends and priorities at some degree. What we would tend to do is look an awful lot at cross dimensions. So we look at the type of customer by the booking channel, or the booking channel by the country, and we start to kind of compare multiple data points to start to kind of give us much more of an insight into what is driving who to book your property, how much they're willing to pay, how they book, how much that costs you. So you can then start to factor in all of that in the net question when it comes to positioning yourself at a compelling value proposition for that customer.
I think what happened historically is that, a lot of the data was a mess, right? Still maybe in some cases, but a lot of it was very difficult to grasp and to understand, all the data that was available in the PMS. So one of the things that was done was to say, let's put everything in buckets, right? Let's create these segments, group things that we know are common, and let's start using that. And then what happened is, the whole hotel or the whole company started to use the same segments. So you group the data and you start using it in the same way. And that was okay because there was no other solution. But I think nowadays, with the granularity of data that's available and the tools that are available, you're able to segment for the need and for the department and for the objective that you're trying to achieve. So if you take a revenue management perspective, you may want to group things in a certain way, in a certain behavior or spending patterns or something that allows you to make revenue management decisions. Those segments may not necessarily be the same as what a marketing person looks like or a salesperson. So I think what's changing now is not these are the 10 segments and this is what you have to use in everything. It's more, how can we group pieces of business in the right way at the right time to then use that in the right way. So if you think about forecasts, you may want to group certain pieces of business that come on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, stay 2 nights, and etc. So you may want to group that, but then maybe a different type of grouping is really for forecasting purposes, because that type of business comes on that type of day of the week and so forth. But that may not be the same as a group you make use for marketing, where you may be looking at total spend at the hotel. Maybe that's a different way to look at segmentation. So I think what's changing a little bit is almost dynamic segmentation based on the purpose that you need it for.
So that's interesting though, because I think you're coming at it very much from filling rooms. Mm-hmm. And when you're sitting in the hotel, and this question was sort of raised in the last session as well slightly, which was about profiles as well. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the individual profile, you'll take an individual profile and you'll drop him into a segment. The problem is he sits in multiple segments. So then it becomes much harder to answer the question, do we need segmentation or not? Because what's the value of segmentation if one guy sits in 5 of the 8 segments? And so does he receive every marketing message, or just the one for the one he visits, he comes and stays in on the most? Whereas I think you're saying the hotel will fill with this sort of segment, a proportion of the hotel and this proportion.
So I think that individual will move between segments. I think one of the limitations, maybe technology-wise, is that we traditionally think we have to fix one person to one segment.
Yeah.
But they're going to move based on their behavior rather than what they've done historically or how we think they should be grouped, right? So Rupert Guttridge works for a company, we're going to put him in a corporate segment. That's kind of the old way to do it. Now it's more, there is a person coming on a certain day of the week, coming through a certain channel, whether it's Rupert or not, that comes as well, but that's maybe you use that in a different way, right? So,
but the problem is, I guess, that then I see the pricing associated with each segment, and then I get savvy and kind of go, you put me in that little box of being a corporate, and I have that sort of rate, but I know if I come on leisure and everything else and I book through booking.com or whatever, I can get a better rate and everything else. So that negotiated rate that we've got for the corporate is kind of irrelevant because that is a much
Absolutely, and that
cheaper way.
transparency is much more now than it's ever been. So as the distribution channels evolve and as we get more and more data, not just the hotels or the company suppliers that have more data, the customers have more data as well. So that transparency is becoming much more important now than it has ever been. So when we think about our pricing structures or our approaches to segmentation, we have to be more savvy to that, and we cannot lock people in certain things. We have to really understand what do they value and what are really their reasons why they're coming and try to address that. So it's getting more difficult, but it's a lot more dynamic than it's ever been. Right?
Mm-hmm. So David, are you looking at guests as an individual, or are you filling the hotel, or allocating is probably the wrong word, but partitioning the available inventory to various different segments and therefore pricing accordingly, regardless of whether it's John Smith or whoever?
I guess like everyone in the room, we look for achieving the most profitable business mix, and we look for what we can do to drive that. When it comes to marketing actions, we don't tend to look at the same segmentation as we look at for forecasting and reporting. We look at our CRM, we look at formulating very targeted campaigns based on lead time, days to arrival booking window, rates, range that the person has paid in the past, whether they're high value, high engagement client, whether they're what their customer value is. And when it comes to driving marketing activities, we're an awful lot more targeted on the various components that make up that person's profile than the segmentation question, which is very much forecasting, budgeting, and I suppose in a way taking all of that personal, individual, highly kind of dynamic data and putting it into some sort of a framework that makes it understandable to people who aren't marketeers and who just want to look at trends over time.
So I'm going, and we've got a very experienced revenue manager at the front line now. So I'm going to ask them both to spend a couple of times about what they should do, on a day-to-day basis. Exactly that. Look at how you'd manage a hotel, what's best practice, and everything else. Because disruption is, you're right, is happening all the time. It's not unique to this year, last year, or next year. So what would you be doing, guys? Just top tips, exactly.
I think the thing that I've spent most of my time on these days is looking for what the competitors aren't seeing and all that information that comes to them. There are certainly a couple of hotels in each of my comp sets that are on autopilot, and they're absolutely happy that all the information that's feeding into all of their systems is doing everything for them. And there's a lot of money on the table that you can take from those properties by looking for the information that you're not seeing on those reports, and that's very much looking at where you see an opportunity ahead of what's happening with your competitors, looking at all the disruption around you, what's happening in your business compared to what you think should be happening, and what concerns have you got and what's driving those. And then the other key thing that takes up most of my time these days is how do you then influence your colleagues around you? How do you influence the marketing department? How do you influence whoever has responsibility for online in your property if it isn't you? And how do you influence your GM and everyone else who's got a voice in the conversation so that you're actually kind of highlighting to them the same opportunities that you might be seeing, and you're getting their feedback and you're getting them involved in driving the strategy that you're all following and that you're all fully bought into. And I think that's where the opportunity is in disruption. The more influence that you can get and the more consistency that you can get in people pulling in the same direction, the more you're probably going to be ahead of your competitors.
But tell us, on a daily basis, we live in a 24-hour news society nowadays. We get to hear the moment there's a terrorism threat or whatever, or there's a tube strike or whatever, or the weather changes, snow's on the way, whatever it is. All of these factors are disruptive factors. Mm-hmm. And how much of your day, when you walk in the office at 10 o'clock in the morning and you're going home at 4, as all good revenue managers do. When you get in, what are you doing first? Grabbing your coffee, sitting down, looking at this, and then do you spend the rest of the day sort of doing strategic stuff, or are you looking for the disruption throughout the day?
Well, usually that sort of stuff is done before I get to work. So you've had a look at what's happening in the market. You've had a look at what's changed since yesterday before you even get into the office.
And how are you doing that?
On the go. I mean, we all have mobile data available everywhere, and we all have time to kill on public transport most days. So
Right, right.
that takes care of a lot of that.
Okay.
A lot of the time, then I would be talking to our sales and marketing team, or my colleagues in our e-commerce team to kind of see what they're seeing. You're then diving deeper into some things that you've noticed that are happening to try and understand what's behind those, and gaining other people's input into what they think is driving that, so you can start to kind of collaborate on what you're going to discuss and decide to do about it,
Yeah.
if anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it is, okay, well, we'll wait and see how that develops, or, is that just a blip, or is that something that we need to go and address with a review of our longer term or shorter term strategy.
And how far out are you looking? So when, are you looking just till the end of the day? Are you looking into tomorrow, maybe next week? Hell, next
In
month?
terms of our strategy,
No, just throughout those, because each one of those is going to have a various depth to it, should we say?
yeah,
So-
no, absolutely. I mean, like most people, you're focusing most of your time on the main sort of lead-in time that you
Yeah.
have. For our hotels, that actually varies. Even though they're in the same city, there's quite a shift in the kind of key time for each of them.
Yeah.
And then absolutely, we're looking at the full 12 months, a couple of times a week, just to see what's
Couple of times.
changing. Most of our competitors work on a 90-day cycle.
Okay.
Not a lot beyond it.
Good. Paul,
Yeah,
how would you do it?
I think there shouldn't really be a need for a revenue manager to sift through all that data and try to draw conclusions. So the technology nowadays is smart enough to do a lot of that for you. So really the role of the revenue manager, I think you were kind of alluding to that, was to take the move away from the tactical decisions and being reactive. Is really how do you communicate with the other departments, whether that's marketing or sales or operations, and really try to drive some more strategic changes. So the tactical things and reacting to, demand's up, or the competitor's doing this, or people are looking at such and such website, a lot of that's already been taken care of. So it's more about, okay, let's look out those periods where we can have an influence, right? Whether that's through marketing, or whether that's through sales, or through the group side, or on property, extra spend, and so forth, where there are opportunities to really make a difference, where a lot of the tactical work that revenue managers used to do, hopefully most of that's gone away. So if there is a terrorist attack, if you have the right data sources and it's all set up in the right way, things should react. You monitor it, and you look at it on the tube or whatever and say, oh, yep, everything's going well. You shouldn't have to do much, right? So I think that's a mind shift that a lot of revenue managers have to go through. Is you don't need to be looking at every single rate every day for every segment. And like we talked about earlier, that's anyway getting impossible because there's not segments. So it's really about looking at it more strategically and moving away from that.
So if so the tools that you might be using, I can't imagine what they would be, but the tools that you might be using to help you make that, are they handling, because disruption is a point in time, is something that's happening, is as we said, any one of those factors, and the tools that you might be using are having to catch up with the event, should we say? They can't read the news, they can't see what's happening, so you're waiting for the lag in terms of the pace or the whatever, the demand to be affected as a result of that. So are you as revenue managers looking ahead to beat the system because you can recognise it faster than the system?
I think in certain circumstances there are, but I think there are some tools available now that allow you to do some of that looking that you're talking about. So we recently formed a partnership with a company called Insight, and they look online at what are customers clicking on, what are they looking at. So before they even book, we get to see already, there's the 3rd of April, there's less people looking than ever before for some reason than they should be now. So even before they've made the booking, we can already see the demand is dropping off. So whether that's due to that terrorist attack or not, maybe, but we can see that the traffic is decreasing. So systems are getting smarter and smarter, and the number of data sources are getting smarter and smarter. So certainly, it's a phased approach, and you shouldn't change from one day to the next, and be cautious with what you are looking at, what you're not looking at. But don't think that things are standing still and that you do have to look at everything, because things are getting smarter. And look at what Google's doing, and just on your iPhone, right?
Sure.
Things don't stand still.
If you haven't got a tool, what should you be doing on a daily basis?
It's a long time since I haven't had any tools
Oh,
to help.
there you
Yeah,
go.
absolutely.
We no longer leave it.
It's just, yeah, I mean, it's look at where you're positioned in your market. It's look at what's happening in your market, and I suppose that exactly what you need to look at very much is going to be determined by what your key priorities are in your hotel, and what actions and by whom needs to support those.
It's a difficult question because I don't think there's such a thing as no tool in revenue management anymore. So whether you use Excel or you use a rate shopper, or there's so many different variations out there. So it's about choosing the right package and the right set of tools that's right for your type of hotel.
Yeah.
Whether that's fully automated or pieces of it, or depends a little bit on each scenario there. But I think it's impossible to do it without any kind of tool.
Spend your time putting together an ROI study to justify the investment that you need.
That you need to buy it. Okay, very good. I think that wraps it up, and I'd like to say a big thank you to these guys, Paul and David.